Good afternoon. My name is Piper O'Keefe, and I am the designated federal official for the Department of Energy's 21st Century Energy Workforce Advisory Board. Welcome, everyone, to today's meeting. I once again want to remind folks that this meeting is being recorded. I would also like to thank the chair, Missy Henriksen, for your time. Thank you to you and all of our members for your continued service and dedication to this advisory board. I'm excited to welcome you all warmly to today's meeting. We have an exciting agenda today, and our chair will go over the content of our meeting. Please note that we will do our best to stick to the times outlined in the agenda. We'll be tracking time for each section of the meeting, and we'll let the group know when time is almost up. Copies of meeting material and public comments will be posted on the 21st Century Energy Workforce Advisory Board's website. I posted the link to this webpage in the chat at the beginning of the meeting. I would like to add that only members of the 21st Century Energy Workforce Advisory Board and certain members of DOE may ask questions of presenters. You'll notice that, according to FACA, we will maintain a public comment period, which will take place at 1:15 p.m. For members of the public requesting time to make a public comment, please limit your remarks to no more than 3 minutes. For those public commenters who have not pre-registered, please send an email to me before the public comment window at ewab@hq.doe.gov. If there are any members of the press, we welcome you. If you have any questions for our speakers, please contact them directly. For questions for DOE staff, please reach out to me via email outside of the meeting. As per FACA, a summary of this meeting will be prepared and made available within 90 days of the meeting. The summary will include a description of the matters discussed and any conclusions reached by the committee. As I noted earlier, in order to maintain an accurate summary, this meeting is being audio and video recorded. I will now take roll call. When I call your name, please repeat your name and organization. Dr. Deanna Ahmed. Okay. Amanda Cage.
Amanda Cage, CEO of the National Fund for Workforce Solutions.
Maureen Conway. Becky Irvin.
Becky Irvin, UAW.
Sarita Gupta. Missy Henriksen.
Missy Henriksen, the Center for Energy Workforce Development.
Chris Levesque. Dr. Tom Krieger.
Tom Krieger, NAB2.
Dr. Dan Marshall.
Dan Marshall, George Washington Institute of Public Policy.
Anne McMonagle. Dr. Gerard Melanson.
Gerard Melanson, National Green Jobs Advisory Council.
K7.
K7, Nez Perce Tribe.
Dr. Jermaine Worrell.
Jermaine Worrell, Augusta Technical College.
And Allison Ziogas. Okay, thank you all. Thank you again for your participation and for your ongoing service to the department. I'm looking forward to the discussions today. And with that, Madam Chair, I convene this meeting of the 21st Century Energy Workforce Advisory Board.
Thank you, Piper. Thank you to all members of the advisory board and to the guests that are here with us today and our colleagues with DOE and Berkeley. Before we get into today's agenda and the specific goals that we hope to accomplish by our time together, I wanted to do just a bit of stage setting for members of the advisory board and also for guests to remind us of kind of what our charge is and where we started. We were first convened on September the 18th, which in some way feels like it was just yesterday and also feels like it was forever ago. And we were reminded at that time that the job of this group is to make recommendations for a strategy for the Department of Energy to support and develop a skilled energy workforce to meet the changing needs of the U.S. energy system. And we've been asked to ensure that this strategy will further efforts to some of the main priority areas that DOE has in job creation, ensuring job quality, and equitable access as America transitions to a clean energy economy. There's a lot in there, and there's several pages that document what all of that looks like. But we as a group, when we first met, started looking at some of the most important things that we felt were appropriate to bring to the Secretary's attention as we start looking at the needs of the future workforce. And we decided to harness our efforts really into 4 areas, looking at barriers to entry within the field or within the industry, job quality, which is part of the mandate. Targeting is the reference to really what are the areas where we most need to focus attention on jobs and the training associated with those jobs. And then the 4th kind of goal area is where help is most needed. That's kind of what the department is doing well right now that's really helping with all of this, where there could be some additional attention offered. And then also kind of a big picture goal. If DOE is going to invest significant funding to support this historic time for the people part of America's energy transition, where that help could be most needed. I think at the time, those of us that were at that September 18th meeting thought, well, that's a pretty big and daunting task before us. But it's been fantastic to see how the leaders within this team have really stepped forward to embrace the opportunities there to provide meaningful recommendations that hopefully will be helpful and useful to the Secretary and her office for all that's before them. We really, I think I speak for all of us in saying how grateful we are for this opportunity to serve. So I think when we started in September until now, almost 3 months later, there's been a deep dive each of the committees has taken into the research that's out there. We've talked with energy companies, workforce boards, educators, labor, employment systems, thought leaders, think tanks, anyone who could help inform the advice and recommendations that we will offer through our paper. I think today's meeting is starting to be the beginning of shifting focus. We could probably all continue to research for the next year as if we're writing our own dissertation. But now I think the time has come to start summarizing what we've learned and start putting this into actionable recommendations. And so that really is going to guide this next stage of our work that's here before us. So Piper, if you could pull up the objectives for today's meeting, I'd appreciate that. So I think this is a mini celebratory lap as we close one part of our work here and move into the second phase. So today's goals, as we look at where we've been and where it's time to head next, we will ask for each subcommittee to report out on the progress that they've made so far and really looking at any outstanding research, data, information that you don't feel that you have yet that will help guide the information you put forward to allow the writing of the paper to actually begin. We'll talk later in today's meeting about the timeline, but I will tell you that we are going to be asked to kind of go pencils down on our portion of the research and recommendations by January the 8th. After we talk with the subcommittees, we want to get into some open discussion on what's emerging, what's really bubbling forward in terms of any common themes or recommendations for the report, making sure that we're not operating as 4 separate silos within this work team, but we're really sharing and benefiting from what one another is finding. And then, as mentioned, we will talk a little bit about the report writing and talk about the process that will be employed there. So those are the objectives for today. And Piper, if you could advance the slide. This is the agenda that we will follow. Starts getting real today as we start hearing the results of some of the deep dive research that's being taken. So as mentioned, we will ask each subcommittee to report out on what they've learned so far. We will have an open discussion, and then we will go into a public comment period and then share some thoughts as we adjourn today. Before we get started and start getting to the good stuff, and that is hearing from each of the subcommittees, any questions or comments to guide our agenda and our time together today? All right, so with that, let's move to the first team, which is combating barriers to energy employment. And Amanda, I know there were some back and forths this morning. Do you want to take the lead on that, or would you like for me to do that?
If you could take, well, it's a question for you. I had taken some notes, but I know there's a power. So We have the chair of our committee is unfortunately traveling internationally right now and can't be on the call. Actually, Missy, if you could if you want to go through the slide deck, and I'm happy to provide sort of comment and color in the background, that would be great.
I would be happy to. Pulling WebEx is not my. Let me pull this up. Amanda, while I'm working through my own personal technical difficulties here, maybe you could start going through the PowerPoint, and hopefully I'll have it up for everyone's viewing pleasure here shortly.
Yeah, and I will say the purpose of our committee, and I'm looking, I also am not used to WebEx, so I'm looking at lots of different places right now.
Just found it.
Okay.
Oh, I cannot share. I'll send it to you, Piper. Sorry about that.
Oh, if we're not going to go, if you can't share, what I'll do is go ahead and sort of give a verbal rundown of what we have talked about as a committee. But the purpose of our committee was really to look at what are some of the systemic barriers that get in the way in terms of people being able to access and continue to participate in the energy workforce. And we did identify a clear group of barriers that we have seen already materialize, and we anticipate there would be more of these barriers as the sector grows. And those are things like transportation, childcare, making sure the jobs have the kind of flexibility to support families, and have the financial support both to enter training programs and complete them. There's a little bit of overlap that we had with Gerard's team about thinking about what kind of supports people need during the training phase of preparing people for these jobs, but that it doesn't end at the end of the training phase. That oftentimes some of these needs are continue to go into folks in the early stages of their work lives. We had some baseline questions about interagency cooperation around supporting these, providing these support services. We know that there are other agencies that really focus on getting people's basic needs taken care of, and we were curious about how that operates. We had some questions very specifically around the American Indian and Alaska Native workers, but really wanted to make sure that, especially when opportunities were going out to the public, that it was we created a situation where wraparound services or policy proposals were thought of in those within that context. We also had questions about how we were holding companies accountable for providing some of these supports, especially if they were receiving subsidies from the government. And so in terms of identifying ways to remove barriers, not just to enter, but to stay in an occupation, to retain in those jobs, there were other things that we thought were important in addition to the sort of the things that have come up historically. We were looking at things like mental health supports, career counseling and mentoring, and peer support groups for folks once they got into a job, and how we could help promote those kind of activities. Making sure people had language access when they came into the job, but also had some of the basic equipment, whether it be work, clothing, tools and equipment, even internet access. Like, how did we make sure people had access to those things? We did really focus in a lot on childcare as a particular issue, especially as we think about gender parity in this area, and looked at some specific things that other departments had been doing. We looked specifically at the Department of Commerce and the work that they did to include childcare provisions in the CHIP Act, and then also the Department of Transportation that has done a lot of work to create a checklist for potential contractors around how they make sure they are providing these wraparound supports as they think about engaging in infrastructure projects, and being very specifically about what portions of public money, and especially federal money, could be used, and being explicit about what money could be used to provide wraparound supports so people feel empowered to be able to use public money that way. And then finally, we identified some best practices. I won't go into them in this meeting, but as part of the paper, looking at some of just some examples around the country where people have really made progress in thinking about how to provide these wraparound supports to folks. So that's a little bit of a synopsis of the work that we've done. Anything you want to add, Missy?
No, I think you guys have done a great job. Amanda, maybe I want to see if there's anyone else from your subcommittee that would like to add on anything from conversations that they didn't feel that they heard in your excellent summary. Amanda, thank you to you and your team for delving into everything so thoroughly. I did hear you mention in one or two instances that maybe you are still looking for a couple of pieces of information till you feel you're ready to close this up. Can you reiterate the specific things that you are looking for?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I was not I know there were members of our committee who were part of a conversation last week with members of the various departments of the Department of Energy, where they were doing some information gathering, mostly identifying, some of the questions that they had were, are there specific initiatives that are currently happening within the Department of Energy that we could think about how to scale up? And so I unfortunately I wasn't part of those conversations, but those were the kinds of pieces of information that folks were looking for. We were able to take a look externally and looking at some other federal agencies because of the roles that some of us on the committee play in other federal initiatives, but really interested in tapping in a little more to see what the Department of Energy has within its resources that in other places of the work that we could capitalize on. And I know there was a smaller group who met with folks from various departments last week to ask some of those questions.
Outstanding. Thank you. One thing I'm just looking back at the slide deck. One thing that I would add to the report out that you provided, in addition to the social support, the economic support for individuals, I think another barrier that we had identified is it can be very difficult to get into this industry. A lot of the entry-level jobs really aren't entry-level. There's implications for understanding certain elements of math or some of the technical things for certain positions. And so maybe looking at how we could remove some of those barriers that exist, perhaps whether it's universal training or coursework or some kind of support that would enable people who are interested in pursuing a career in energy but may not have the support system to help them outside of the wraparound services, but just in some of the pre-employment types of preparation.
Yeah, that brings up for me, Missy, there are two other elements that are related to that. One around just access and information about the jobs. So one of those things was about sort of fundamental skills, right? In addition to the technical skills that people would have, but also helping people understand the different occupations and how to access those occupations, like a better understanding of what, just a better understanding of what the roles actually were and the social networks it took to have access to that kind of information. So that has also come up as a barrier, like a barrier to entry, being not just around sort of wraparound supports to get you through a job or get you into the job, but just a broader understanding of how somebody starts to understand that these are careers that are open to them, literally understand what the careers are because they're a little opaque to people, and then making sure people have access to the social networks that will help them gain access and better understand those positions. So that also came up as a parallel conversation within our group.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, it's that lack of awareness, people's understanding for sure. I know we're right about at time here. Before we move on to the next group, is there anyone that has any questions or reflections for Amanda and her team?
And I just want to give credit. It's Deanna's team. I'm just pitch hitting for today, but she's the chair of the committee.
Team effort. All right. Well, Thank you for reporting out on behalf of the group, and thank you to all of your fellow subcommittee members for the thinking that went behind that. And I will apologize. I think I went out of order. It looks like the effectiveness of existing DOE programs was supposed to be first. So turn it over to that team. Dan, I see you coming on camera. Are you going to report out for the group?
I think Jermaine is going to lead us off here.
Yeah, I'll be pretty brief. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have been quite busy, as you know. I would say digging into the data and asking some questions. I know that we had several DOE staff presentations within the last week, and we'll be working collaboratively to get a meeting together here shortly. But I will ask Dan to go ahead and just give us some of his debriefs of what we've learned, and Missy as well. Feel free to jump in.
Thank you, Jermaine. And to start off, thank you to the Department of Energy for arranging several meetings in which we've had the opportunity to hear reports from the offices of the department and begin to dig into their programs and how they relate to evaluating the effectiveness of them. So there have been 2 of these meetings. We've had the opportunity to meet with key staff from 6 departments. And I think we found kind of 3 different things. First of all, there are some departments that have new programs as the money is flowing down into them, and also relatively new staff. And the staff is kind of getting their arms around the past programs and also spending some intense effort getting the new programs going. So in that area, it may be a little hard to evaluate, but I think if we look at what they're doing, it really points to the future and points to recommendations and activities that should be continued and intensified. Secondly, we have other offices that have a great deal of past activities. And what we see there is they're adding a workforce development component to those activities. So there's one office that has directed a great deal of attention over the years to deploying energy resources in their areas. But they found that sometimes the work is actually done by contractors, and they say, well, this should really be done by our people. We should try to keep our jobs in that area. So they're beginning to make a turn towards how can they empower their own people in their areas to obtain the training to add to that deployment. And then third, we have other offices that have been deeply engaged in workforce development programs over a long period of time. And it's in that area that we're delving into the deep kind of analysis of the effectiveness of those programs. So that's a kind of quick overview of what we've learned so far as we identify particular reports and the learnings that have gone on. So, Missy, have anything to add there?
Dan, I don't. I think you summarized so well by saying there are a lot of new offices, a lot of new individuals, and I think a lot of that stems from how this administration has prioritized not just the technical part of the energy transition, but also particularly this office is prioritizing the people part to make sure we are people ready for all that's before us. So I think all that newness is a very important consideration, but I think it speaks to kind of where things are headed and the investments that are being made.
And just quickly, I think our team summarized it well. I think moving forward, what we're going to try to do is try to provide a North Star, especially as they're looking towards launching some new initiatives, just giving them some things to think about, especially for our new programs that are coming on board, specifically related to workforce development, ensuring that they're keeping that at the forefront. And then secondarily, in a perfect world, we will love to see some level of scorecard. I think all of us would want to be able to see if there's a new program coming down, how many new jobs are anticipated to be created, how many folks are going to be trained, what is the economic impact. So there are some KPIs or measurements that I think will be helpful. And we're going to try to unravel some of that from the past programs, but also for the new ones that are going to be starting, having them to have those KPIs on the front end. So when we get to year X, they can be able to say, well, this was successful because we were able to do X, Y, and Z. And so hopefully learning and some of our advice will play into that in the future.
Thanks, Jermaine. And I'm hearing the importance of metrics and evaluation coming up in both of these first two reports. We want to make sure if we are investing in certain areas, making recommendations, really looking at moving the needle, that indeed the action is being taken. Any questions, recommendations, comments from the group for this work team? Well, thank you, gentlemen. We are going to turn our attention next to measuring and addressing job quality. And Gerard, are you going to? Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I'm messing up my
Maureen.
committees here.
Is Maureen on? She hit me up in the chat, but I didn't see her to answer. So I guess I will take this. Okay, and measuring and addressing job quality. We did have some meetings with some of the DOE departments, and it seems like the community benefits plan is the way that the ones that we spoke to are actually addressing it. We do have a way. We use the Job Quality Tools Library at the Aspen Institute, and they want to look at wages, benefits, scheduling, legal rights, equity and inclusion, opportunity to build skills and advance within the job, a supportive work environment, and worker voice. And I think that's probably one of the best ways to start, is what Aspen already has. And then we need to find out about how to address. Now, Dan and Jermaine talked about KPIs, and I think that maybe we should get together and try to figure out how the departments that you talk to are actually measuring, and so that we can figure out what the current practice is and how we can improve that. So that's really basically about it for our group.
Becky, was there a conversation that you all had about really where the ultimate accountability is for job quality? I think that there were some issues of educators want to prepare people for jobs that are going to have high quality, yet not always knowing how their students are being, kind of what their career trajectory is. Do you want to speak to that just a bit?
Well, we talked about that a little bit, as that I think that we need to be more collaborative, that there needs to be more voice of several different groups, labor, the community colleges, workforce agencies, and then the companies also, so that we know, if it's going to be a contractor doing the job, that they know what the rules are, and or what the best avenue to take to make the jobs quality for the people, and that they have long-term career paths. And if it is a company, say a manufacturing company working within the space, that that there's more collaboration. It's just not the companies or the workforce agencies getting information and creating jobs that don't have a long-term gain.
Thanks for that. I think the strength of your subcommittee is already coming into play. Many of you may recall that during one of the recent meetings with the various departmental reps within DOE, this group made I guess an observation or asked about the measurement of job quality. And the comment was made immediately, well, that sounds like something maybe we should be putting into some of our contract awards, is really trying to assess the kind of what we're seeing back in job quality. So I think that stems from some of the conversations you all have already been having, and already making a difference in how we move forward with the job quality assessments and measurements within the department.
Thank you.
I know job quality is something that kind of relates to a lot of the work that's probably happening within the different groups. Does anyone have any questions for Becky or any other individuals from her subcommittee that are part of this call today? Or any recommendations?
See, just a comment. I just want to echo what you were saying and what Becky was saying about how does that get funneled down to the contractor level. I think that's going to be a very interesting exercise. And just one that I just think, the group just be very intentional working with DOE staff on that. That's always a challenge, just ensuring that people meet quality standards for jobs. So obviously they have to meet the metrics for the actual work output itself, but jobs that entail that work output, that can be tricky depending upon what contractors you do solicit from. So I just think that it's a very noble opportunity, but it's just one that trying to put that into action, I think is going to be interesting.
Thanks for adding that advice and recommendation in there, Jermaine. Appreciate that. Amanda. Amanda, your hand is up, but I see that you're muted.
I am sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to acknowledge some spillover into our group when it comes to quality jobs. Another sort of element that we discussed was using community benefits agreements or community benefit acknowledgements to be able to bring both a community voice into the process. Also, we also talked about it in regards to sort of environmental standards, but this was another way of accountability around quality jobs that came up within our subcommittee.
Thanks for adding that in, Amanda. I think it really is important that we do look for those intersectionalities between the various work groups. Becky, is there anything that you or your team feel that is missing from your data collection, information gathering at this point that will hinder the work you have left to do within your team?
I believe that, like I said, talking to Dan Marshall and Jermaine about KPIs and the Department of Energy subgroups that actually have some KPIs, because the last group that we talked to didn't seem to measure other than putting in community benefits agreements. And we need to find somebody who's actually doing some measuring, what they are measuring. And I think that's going to be beneficial to know exactly what is being measured so that we can say what is good and what can be better.
Pam, I saw your box light up just a second ago. Did you want to add to the conversation?
No, sorry, that was must have been accidental.
Okay, no worries, no worries. Okay. All right, if no other questions, thoughts on this group, then now, Gerard, we're going to move on to you for scope prioritization and targeting.
Okay, well, no, I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, based on our interview so far, we have identified some areas where we may want to focus the report around. But at the same time, we're still in the process of tweaking this report. So we would love to hear your thoughts on these initial takeaways that we have. We already are sure we will make some adjustments moving forward, but as our interviews progress. So far, many of you have done interviews with us. So I really appreciate it, especially those who are part of association, like Becky at the UAW last Friday, Missy, you're being interviewed while I was traveling about a week ago or so. And so I really appreciate everybody who has taken time out, and Kay and everybody, Tom, in the near future. We're also trying to balance since the time is short, we're trying to get more associations and groups than say like an individual employer like Lindy Gas or ExxonMobil. It's more individuals and associations. So we have done for example, the IEC, the Independent Electrical Contractors, but we're actually got meetings set up for the IBEW. So there's a balance of merit shop and union input of what we're trying to do forward here. So far, the jobs and demands in the energy sector are essentially, it's really probably no surprise to people at this meeting because we've been talking about it, are basically essentially legacy skilled trades and crafts. However, these jobs might require a new skill or certification, but in general, it looks like we need to train the workforce in existing trades just at a greater value. Examples could include, we talked about this, probably more electrical workers, even heavy equipment technician that's dealing with diesel, compressed natural gas, but bringing them into more EV related training for that heavy high voltage equipment, and eventually either the ICE engines of internal combustion engine of hydrogen, or the hydrogen fuel cell, which is very similar to an EV technology. Same for automotive technicians, obviously EVs, hybrids, construction, manufacturing, energy auditors, and so forth. And general maintenance, even the factories of today are a lot different from the factories of yesterday, but we still need to construct these factories. So you just need simple individuals. There's shortages of rebar tires, but at the same time you need people to program and train PLCs and automation, and also maintain some of these robots that are on the shop floor. So there's a lot happening there. And then just general HVAC, a lot of these data centers that are in place. Nobody really wants to talk about quality jobs, want to work in a 90-degree, 100-degree shop floor. So HVAC, industrial scale, even smaller scale, still going to be needed. And not only to meet the growth of what these investments from the federal government have made to deal with, but also you are very aware of the retirement. You hear the word the silver tsunami is very prominent in all crafts. So that's the first level. There's about 4 levels that we are looking. The second level is successful upskilling and reskilling of these technicians that we have that are doing some work for us in high quality training and career jobs. I think this also overlaps in quality jobs too. The issue, we really want to prevent single training or single certifications for individuals to get their foot in the door. We want to work with their employers to have ongoing training opportunities for individuals. So if somebody is coming on board as a solar technician or a solar installer, we would like to see training and emphasis on them becoming either a full-scale project manager, if that's what they want to do, or a licensed electrician. And that may take 3 to 4 years if they're in a registered apprenticeship, or sometimes 5 years. But it really helped to get their foot in the door, because they could go from working from Circle K, making $15 to $16 an hour, be a PV installer with a couple of weeks worth of training. They could start making $22, $23 an hour. But during the weekends or night, or even during the shift, they could get training and virtual training in some form or fashion to be an electrician or major project manager and so forth. So there's a need for successfully upskilling. And then also with this technology is changing so quick. I mentioned automotive, equipment, HVAC, demand of new technology that's current, but individuals still need to be access to training so their skills are not antiquated and they can make the transition with us. The excellence, robust partnerships are critical to bring local folks together to address demands for skilled workers and other energy sector challenges. For example, less resource community-based organizations need enough supports to be a voice at the table or part of grants. There was a lot of discussion just about grant access. Some grants are very cumbersome. You need just a whole team to just go after some of these federal grants and to manage and to be accountable for these federal dollars. Especially these organizations, they're smaller in scale, but they have a lot of social capital in our communities, and they have a strong equity focus. Tribal colleges fit in here, and even some very progressive workforce groups that fit in this organization that we need to consider. And this, beyond this wraparound support, is just access to training programs where some of these organizations are better able to meet the needs of the community where they are. And then the energy needs to facilitate between traditional energy and workforce practitioners. this is all still kind of part of grants and people at the table. I think this is a great space for associations and intermediaries to facilitate some of these conversations and bring in these dollars to the local level. Kind of the fourth aspect that we're coming across: to meet worker demand, all aspects of the energy sector need to address equity challenges. You know, most occupations that we're coming across are currently employing about 70% white males. Please don't get me wrong, I still want to see more of our white brothers to be gainfully employed and get more opportunities, which this sector does provide. But we do need a stronger focus on building a pipeline for women and for BIPOC individuals to grow this economic pie that all these federal dollars are coming down to the table. And this brings in a great opportunity for us to do that. And also, it was coming through this, and this is probably lower level, this is probably more investigation needs to happen here. But, you know, currently, like in utilities and some other sectors of the energy sector, they're not really hiring at scale. What we probably need is re-entry citizens coming back into our community. Primarily, and we're talking about those with skills, those with work ethic, those who've kind of done what they were asked to do by the Department of Justice, but opening up those opportunities for those individuals to come back into our community and be gainfully employed into the sector. We have seen that registered apprenticeships can maintain this existing workforce, and we still want to support registered apprenticeships in all forms of fashion in union and merit shop. But sometimes, and this is still this is more of the in the weeds of the training, registered apprenticeships sometimes can limit some of the strategies that we need to put forth. For example, typically in electrical field, they like to bring in solar on kind of like the last year of their electrical training. And I kind of mentioned, to meet some of the scale and some of the grid scale demand of installers, we would need, and there's opportunities of getting solar first, and then bringing in a registered electrician on on top of their solar training, instead of vice versa. Instead of waiting for 4 years to get electrical training, which in some aspects I think is neat, because you don't want to be pigeonholed just on a solar panel install and have no job after these mega jobs are done. We just got to look at the flexibility and work with individuals and highlight, if you may know some programs that are doing some reverse engineering of crafts to bring in the first green training on top of the legacy skill training that's needed and to be certified as a journeyman level technician in their field. And then also the really final and key thing I think has been echoed across the board: wraparound supports are critical for one, attracting, training, and retaining these workers that we'll be doing, that will be help us rebuild this workforce and help us move forward with our energy transition. And that's for it for right now from the group. Once again, thank you for everybody who's provided us and given us ongoing feedback. And then we're still doing surveys. We're meeting with SEIA here, or at least I don't know if I'll be able to make it, but have somebody doing an interview with SEIA, and then IREC here coming up, and like I said, IBEW here shortly. So if anybody else you think I need to talk to, please email me or let me know now. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Gerard. Thank you for the very thorough report and the excellent work that's gone into really trying to understand some pretty complex stuff in this space about where the jobs are most needed and what the training is going to be required to get everybody career ready. Questions for Gerard, or any comments on what he shared? I'll just start with, was delighted to hear registered apprenticeships coming into the conversation today. Obviously, lots of opportunities with that, and you were, I think, covered both sides of that, the opportunities that they create, but also some watch outs in those spaces, which is great.
Oh, Missy, and was here speaking. We're still researching the demand that you've uncovered of engineers across the board. and seeing where the gaps are in the engineering field too. So we're still doing some investigations regarding that demand.
Thanks for that.
Just one quick
Yeah,
comment,
oh, go ahead.
Missy.
Yeah.
Just one quick comment on the apprenticeships having, working in an area where we have a lab. I just think, and I can't speak for all of the labs, I know that one of our challenges / opportunities is just the demand. So just giving you a number, this is a real life number right here at Augusta Tech. We had over 695 people apply for 20 slots for an apprenticeship. That's recent, 695, and we can only take 20. So, that's a very good problem to have, showing that the demand is there, but to be able to scale up quickly and trying to get that many folks an opportunity is just something. And again, that's just one national lab. I cannot speak for the others in the country, but I know our peers at Aiken Tech just within 3 years have finally gotten it over 100 students. But just think about that, there's still another 500 that apply that can't get in. So it's an opportunity for us to try to scale that across the country, because that obviously shows people do want these jobs. And I know that the lab takes a lot of vetting and a lot of care in terms of who they vet into the program. But it's just something for us to consider if we really want to be serious in getting numbers in the future.
Thanks for surfacing that, Jermaine, and bringing kind of the real life perspective. That's on the classroom instruction, I assume. And then the other thing I've heard with registered apprenticeship programs, another challenge, and Tom or Becky, you may have some good perspective here, is for many apprenticeship programs, they require a one-on-one mentorship relationship, and they're not enough of mentors or journeymen to actually have people work under is another challenge, at least that I've heard. So lots of good interest in registered apprenticeship programs, but some potential barriers there as we look at implementation.
I'd just like to speak on that a little bit. The one-on-one, that's probably the best way to learn. I was an apprentice myself, and that just focuses the need right now. I mean, the majority of us that went through apprenticeships are on our way out. We're getting ready to retire, and you have to have journeymen to train people. So apprenticeship right now is a big deal to get skilled workers to remaining in place to train new workers. And I know that Gerard and I talked a bit about STEM education and being able to drive that K through 12 system to actually get back into not just trades, but hands-on building things and knowing that this, one, they're good jobs, and two, that is actually, it's not that dark, dank, terrible place that it used to be. They're pretty clean plants, and the work is great. And it's a good middle class job. I think we need to get back to that.
Two quick comments. Tom Krieger from NAB2. The cure for the mentorship, there are some ways to address that. I mean, we don't really hear that in the joint labor management sector of construction, because we have in all of our collective bargaining agreements ratio requirements, and that's how you address it. I mean, construction's a dangerous activity, and we recommend nothing higher than 1-to-1, one apprentice to one journey level worker, and that maintains the mentoring relationship. We also have a program that we're working in Ohio, New York, and a number of different states called Mentorship Matters, which is a training program by a group called Skill Plan out of Vancouver. They're the training arm of the Canadian building trades, and they train workers in how to be more effective mentors, because a lot of construction workers are good construction workers, but they may not be good teachers, and they may not be, just whether they're introverts or whatever, in terms of passing on that knowledge effectively to the next generation. And so we do have training programs from that. The other comment I'd like to make is on the schools, and I can't agree more. The one group I think everybody has to engage with in terms of all of the subcommittees here is the American School Counselors Association. We need to focus on gatekeepers, as we call them, the folks who are out there giving workforce development, as people call it, career advice to young people. What we have found is that among the school counselors, they get no graduate training in workforce development. So as a result, your average school counselor, as well-meaning as they are, they don't know anything about registered apprenticeship. So we now sponsor their national convention, the national meeting of the American School Counselors Association. We're working with them at the national level and on local level, trying to educate counselors, because that's one of the biggest groups that provides career advice to young people. And if they don't know we exist in a registered apprenticeship, like in our industry in construction, we're not going to see their students. So that's, I think, something that we have to address here, is to identify who those gatekeepers are. Coaches are another one. You don't think of that, but high school coaches give a lot of advice on workforce development, on career opportunities that parents certainly do. Counselors, all the workforce development world, we have to make sure that everybody understands what registered apprenticeship and what those pathways are, and the fact that we need more women and people of color, justice involved, Native Americans in those programs.
I'll second everything you said, but I'll just throw in another group we need to really target, which is the trustees of local school boards. At the end of the day, a superintendent is going to do what the school board tells the superintendent to do. So if the focus is AP honors classes, that's what their metrics are going to go towards, regardless whether you got a counselor who is well educated or not. And that's a group that I just think we struggle with, because they start looking at quote unquote prestige. And that's an indicator based upon other metrics that have nothing to do with skilled trades and workforce development. So to your point, I think it has to be multifaceted in terms of how we get the message out there, whether it is through us communicating that, DOE communicating it through TV commercials, campaigns, but school boards have to really be held accountable for metrics outside of standard academic measures.
And then one thing I want to add, and from our on our EWAB board, very highly effective pre-apprenticeships can help build a pipeline too, where they're not a job for people to hire into apprenticeship slot, but they can build a pipeline very effectively and bring that awareness and community engagement. So the pipeline is being built while these opportunities are growing. So, and we're going to probably highlight that as part of their appendix or the programs, so very effective pre-apprenticeship programs for a pipeline.
Staff meeting, 1% of salary for 1 year, 2 years, 2%, 3
I would
years,
just-
3 taxes are taken out. And
I would just remind you, if you're not,
Somebody
strongly encourage you.
thank you.
They're giving us some good tax advice. I was actually kind of listening in. I
My
didn't
pen
work
was
on my
ready. His
deductions.
pen was ready. No, that's awesome. So we've got just a couple minutes left in this block of the agenda for today, and I think it's kind of this group sharing what common themes are emerging, any last minute questions you'd like to ask of one another. While you all were speaking, I did take the liberty of writing down some things that I think we're hearing across all the different groups. So I'll take a stab, and please jump in, either course correct me or add to the list. First of all, it sounds like predominant focus on skilled trades and contractors is where some of the greatest needs are. And I think that's where most people are focusing their efforts, whether it's looking at barriers to entry, the jobs training that is needed, some of the other things that are on our work plan. A quick aside, you may have heard Gerard mention we were having an email exchange. I agree that skilled trades are where the most hiring demand is. I was also suggesting that I've heard a lot about a need for engineers, and that's just for people that felt left out of that conversation loop. So that's something his team is going to be taking a look at. So skilled trades, contractor focused. The importance of KPIs and metrics in all that the recommendations are out there. We want to make sure if people are making investments, whether it's time or financial resources, that we are evaluating the outcomes and measurements there. The importance of job quality, obviously, that goes back to the charge of this group as a front and center area of attention for us. I heard that come out. And with that, whether it's supportive services, or what have you, just making sure that we are focused on quality jobs. Equity, a huge component of the conversation today, and also part of the charge that this group was given in the statutes, looking at justice, 40 communities, BIPOC, and more women, just making sure that these opportunities that can be drive economic development in communities, that can be family supporting, family changing, are really available to all. And we are providing the on-ramps for opportunities, whether that's through career awareness programs, whether that's through training opportunities, or really just the navigation of what these career paths would offer. And I guess with that also, and this may be a personal bias, so I will reflect that, is the importance of visibility for energy careers. To this last part of the conversation, people don't know about opportunities because of some changes that have been made in school systems and what is being pushed out and offered to students, particularly in communities underrepresented in the industry. If you haven't had friends or family members that have paved the way for you, you might not understand the career opportunities that exist here. So it's bringing greater visibility to energy careers and those on-ramp supportive opportunities to prepare people for jobs. Anything that you would challenge back on those themes, or anything that I missed that anyone would like to bring forward into the conversation? And obviously, I'm sure as soon as we hang up from today's call, there will be an aha moment where someone says, oh, I should have mentioned. Believe me, plenty of opportunities left for that in the weeks ahead. All right, before we turn the virtual microphone over to the next steps, just a moment here for members of the EWAB to any last comments, considerations, recommendations that you've heard in your learnings that you want to make sure that another group is considering, or that you might want to pass along to them? Anything in that space? Okay. Again, email is our friend, and I expect that over the next couple of weeks there will be lots of messages going out of requests for anybody have any thoughts on or any examples of. Those are all welcome. All right, well, we started out, quick review of where we started just 3 months ago. So we just heard great work and great progress that's being made as we've tried to boil the ocean down a little bit and look at where some of the most important areas for DOE's attention are. So now let's turn to how we're going to get there. Let's talk a little bit about the process that we're going to follow for getting this paper done. And I've lost the agenda in here. So to the Berkeley team, I'm going to turn it over to you, as I think we're going to move into a discussion about the timeline and what you all need. I don't know if you guys are going to take it or if DOE is going to take it on the timeline. Piper, do you want to bring up the timeline? Or Pam, you want to take it from here?
I'm happy to. Or Piper, did you guys want to go through the timeline?
Hi, this is Maya. I'm happy to have Berkeley walk through timeline.
Super. Okay, great. So as you can see, and I think was in the agenda, we're asking that the subcommittees send us a detailed outline that includes your findings and your recommendations to us and to the full group. I guess I should say by us, we mean Berkeley, your writing team, but also to the full group so that you can see each other's recommendations and weigh in on what you're seeing there. Because obviously, as I think Piper mentioned at the outset, this is the report itself is from the full committee. So the subcommittees are doing the pre-work, and then the final recommendations will be things that the full committee agrees with. So sharing them, we'll get started on working with the writing of those into a draft, and we'll be open to receiving obviously comments from from all of the members of the committee. If you can do that in an email version, in a Word document. And I think at this point, Arem, I think it would be great if you would share with us, with the team, kind of the example that we've prepared. And Narem did some great work over the weekend on pulling together an example.
Thank you, Pam. So I am noticing that I'm not allowed to share my screen because I'm joining the meeting from my browser.
I just gave you permissions. See if it works now.
Okay. Unfortunately, because I'm joining from the browser, it's not gonna work. Sorry about that.
Want me to share?
That would be great. Thank you.
I'm gonna need a minute, so if you want to just go ahead and get started.
Yeah. So we thought it would be a good idea to give you all an outline that we thought we would have for the report, and also gently ask you to share your drafts in a particular template so that it is really easy for us to compile them together and synthesize. Yes, so as far as the outline of the report goes, we'll basically start with an introduction. And in the introduction, we will share the purpose of the report and briefly introduce the subcommittees, the members. And in 2 or 3 paragraphs in the introduction later, we will provide descriptions of the documents and existing information that committees reviewed. Offices they met for consultation, and we will also basically go over very briefly over the process, how many times the subcommittees met, the process in general, etc. And then we will move on to the specific subcommittee recommendations. So for each subcommittee, okay, here is the perfect. So for each subcommittee, we will provide a, and this will be mainly based on the recommendation drafts that you provide. We will ask you to provide a background on why it matters to address eliminating barriers to employment or measuring and assessing job quality. So basically a background why the work that your subcommittee was tasked with matters in the grand scheme of things, and also a summary of the main findings that each subcommittee came up with. That would be based on your review of existing workforce outcomes, workforce programs, and investments. And then we will list the recommendations. That would be your top 3 to 5 recommendations. And for each recommendation, we will ask you to provide a motivation for the specific recommendation. And this could follow the general findings, maybe in a bit more detail. And maybe some guidelines, more detailed suggestions on implementations of the specific recommendation. And then we will ask you to give some examples of how this recommendation can be accomplished based on existing applications in summary form. And then for the appendix, we will ask you to provide details of examples of the ways that several programs might already be doing this. So, and then, yes, we would expect this, expect to have this for each recommendation that you provide. Yes, so basically this is the general outline the report will follow. We will repeat each for each subcommittee and then conclude and provide the appendix at the end. We will also request to, yes, we provided an example that I think will be, we'll just circulate this after this meeting. I prepared an example of a partial draft based on Sarita Gupta's memo on wraparound services, which was really helpful. So although I think she's not here, I'd like to thank her. Yes, so the drafts will be, we gently ask you to submit your drafts in the, like based on the template of your introduction, basically the purpose of the committee, your main findings, and each recommendations with motivating background on the specific recommendation and examples. And we will circulate an example that we put together based on Sarita Gupta's memo, I think.
Yep, super. And I think at the end of this section, there'll be an opportunity for you all to say, no, that doesn't work for us. Because at the end of the day, we want to remember that this is your report. But that's an outline, that's a proposal from us about how we think, based on what we've learned from all of you in these last meetings and the kinds of things that we heard today, very, very helpful, sort of that you presented in a similar format to what was just described. So we're hopeful that that format, report structure works for you. And then if we can get those materials from you by the 8th, then what we'll do in process is we'll start working to turn that into a first draft document, and we'll be working closely with the subcommittee chairs, and obviously the subcommittee chairs will direct, to reach out to other members of the subcommittees. And then we'll hope to have that first round of draft of those components available for you all to share with each other in sort of a report to the full committee by by the January 22nd EWAB public meeting. And that will be an opportunity then for the full committee to discuss and refine what's been written in that first draft. Then the writing team, Berkeley and DOE and all of you through our collaborative process will edit the report according to what we hear from you all at that January 2nd subcommittee meeting. And our target is to send a full draft then of that refinement to all of you for your review, somewhere between, for you to review, we hope between February 1st and 8th. We'll ask you for a fairly quick turnaround there to mark out some time on your calendars to review that draft between February 1 and 8. And then at the February 20th EWAB meeting, after we've received any refinements that you have after the 8th, put that into a next draft. And really February 20th at public meeting is an final opportunity then to discuss and refine one more time to really get it where you all want it to be. Once that's done, it will go through the process of making it suitable for final publication, all of the formatting and things that need to be done in that process. And then that puts us at a March 20th tentative date for a public meeting at which we hope that you will be able to present your report. So Missy, do you want me to throw it back over to you for discussion around that to see if that made sense to folks and if it works for the committee?
Sure, Pam, thank you. And what I might suggest, I know we're pushing on the timeline for the time allocation for public comment. So maybe we spend a minute or two on any initial considerations to the timeline that's been outlined. And then maybe over the next week, I will reach out to the subcommittee chairs and just see how everything's sitting after everyone's had a chance to review this document and digest it just a bit. So any quick comments on what Pam reviewed and the dates suggested? That means everyone loves it, Pam. We're good to go.
I would just ask on behalf of my committee in particular, there are a number of dates of actual meetings that were mentioned. The sooner we can get those meetings on our calendars, the better, in order to make sure we're doing the in-between work that needs to be done.
Great point, Amanda. There's
We
that
just
really
finalized those meeting dates today because of the when to meets that you all submitted. So thank you for that. And we're working to get the Federal Register notices and everything else out. So I will also send you calendar holds as we do that.
Perfect.
There's that beautiful part of the year transition that you start out with the calendar that just is pure, and then all of a sudden it starts getting populated really quickly, just like the end of the year before it. So I understand what you're asking for there. Okay. So subcommittee chairs, please be on the lookout for a note. And I am going to try and initially I was going to try and see if we could just postpone any group meeting until January. I did hear from one or two of you, that it would be great if we could just put our heads together briefly before the December holidays. So we'll try and see if we can get that on the books and we can spend a minute or two on this proposed timeline. Okay. Any other immediate comments back on that? And otherwise, I'm going to turn the agenda back over to Piper. Okay. Piper, take it away.
Thanks, Missy. I will now open up the floor for public comments, noting that I did not receive any by email ahead of time. So unless there's anyone on the call who has an immediate comment. Okay, seeing none, we can close the public comment period and go back to the rest of the meeting.
Thanks for that, Piper. I think at this point, the agenda suggests there's some time here for closing reflections. So let me open it up to members of the EWAB first to start with any moments you have here, anything that you'd like to share on your learning journey so far, on the work before us, or the opportunities in crafting your portions of the paper. Any initial reflections or thoughts? Amanda?
So I would like to say at our first meeting, it seemed overly daunting in terms of the scope of what we were trying to accomplish in thinking about the breadth of occupations and jobs that we could be thinking of. And I've been really impressed. I know it feels to everybody like we're boiling the ocean, but our ability to sort of appropriately scope quickly has been impressive to me in terms of the committee, and the amount of overlap and interplay and interconnectedness across the groups, even when we weren't talking to each other at the front end in terms of what we've decided to focus on. It's just become clear to me what we need to be looking at and focusing on. And I am surprised that we came to I felt very intimidated by the spectrum of what we were asked to consider. But I feel very confident about where we are applying our focus, mostly because multiple groups came sort of to the same places. There's been so much overlap conversation and issues that have bled into each other's subcommittees that I think we are very much on the right track. So I just want to, especially to the committee chairs, I am not one of them. I know it's a small amount of time and people have been like frantically scheduling meetings, but it's been clear to me that all of that has led us to a good point and pushed us in a direction that I think will make it easier for us to provide recommendations in the time that we've been allotted.
Really, really well said, Amanda. Thank you for sharing that. It does feel almost validating, right? To get together, everybody's kind of working in their own little silo and then come together or talk with colleagues through offline meetings and hear that we're really working in the same direction. It was very clear when we first came together that our focus was the energy workforce, not a particular portion within the entire sector, but it really does feel like everybody's been focused on that big broad universe out there. And it's amazing. While technically there may be a lot of differences, the commonalities of workforce development challenges and needs and priorities are overwhelmingly similar, is at least what I'm hearing so far. Any other reflections? I know I started with EWAB first. DOE team, let me turn to you all. See any reflections that you all would like to share.
Okay, I'll go first, and then Piper, you can jump in. One thing that I wanted just to emphasize is for the subcommittees to let us know what we can do to be helpful to you. We are setting up more of those Q&A sessions, but Also, if there's just any questions you have that we can answer, please do come to us with them. As we've said, we can't guarantee that we can do all of the research questions that could exist, but we would like to hear them, and we think that now's the time to be doing that. I'd also say, as a reflection, you know, the scope in the legislation for this is quite broad. You know, how is the department supporting the workforce and supporting workforce development for the energy sector? And DOE has both grants and programs for workforce development. We've had a number of those offices present to you all. We've had, we shared that list of workforce programs, but then it also supports workforce development in all of its deployment projects and all of its research and development projects. And those are the projects that are, you know, by far the vast majority of DOE's funding. And so I would encourage the board to think about both things. We really, I think the report should have recommendations that are clear for both things. Is, you know, how are we supporting a workforce development ecosystem through our deployment dollars? What are we asking stakeholders that touch those funds to do? Also, how are we supporting and accelerating workforce development through our workforce development dollars? So that's a scope differentiation that I hope is clear in the recommendations you all do, because it will be so powerful to the department if it is broken out like that. So that people know you're talking to them. You know, you're not just talking to the programs that oversee workforce development. You're talking to research and development projects. You're talking about massive deployment projects. Anyway, that's my addition, and I'll pass it to Piper.
Thanks, Maya. Yeah, the only thing that I would add is just to emphasize we're here to help you to the extent we can. So if there's any other offices that would be helpful for you to reach out to, please let us know as soon as possible so that we can make those connections and help you in answering all these big questions you're trying to tackle. But thank you all for your hard work already. I know we've asked a lot from you, and I really appreciate how much you've done in a short amount of time.
You all have been incredibly helpful, and thank you for reiterating your interest and willingness to continue to support through the process. Very grateful for that. Berkeley team. Oh, okay. Let me go to you next.
Yes, so I guess I'm really interested in the recommendations. And
Hey, I think you got muted.
yes, Maya, thank you for your comment, because I was wondering when we're gonna, I guess, will our recommendations be, and what will they look like, and how clear are they? I guess my question at this time, if Department of Energy has the workforce programs, if they were going to do a massive project, do they have all the resources within the building for the wraparound support that the committees are recommending for transportation, childcare, housing, other? And if not, is our recommendation going to ask that the secretary reach out to the other federal agencies for, let's cut into some of our pies and build a single plan, a single budget to support this or that project in our proposed plan?
I think to answer that question, I would sort of, my thinking is like, it's more of a question, you know, does the board recommend that work, you know, as a theory of change, that the federal agency should pay for the wraparound supports for every relevant workforce program? Or as a theory of change, do you see projects that are applying for DOE funding as they should incorporate that into their budget? And then from there, you know, depending on what your theory of change would be, the recommendation would follow, because, you know, there is the deployment projects and the research and development projects, which require community benefit plans. And you'll see in all of the community benefit plans materials, the About Community Benefits Plan page is really the rich resource to look at. It has a template there that applicants are asked to use when they submit their community benefits plan. And in that template, it says, you know, just looking at it, it mentions different wraparound supports, and it says things like, how are you going to support people in training? These are effective, helpful ways to do it. Is it as clearly articulated as the board would recommend? That's another question, but you can see that it's incorporated there. But then there's these workforce development programs, the 300 million that SCEP oversees, for instance, SCEP being the state and community energy programs. Angela Dayton was the one who presented in the Q&A, and Mary McPherson presented at the kickoff meeting. That office, how are they, they're supporting workforce development programs. And in that funding, you know, how are wraparound supports being funded? To add another level to that theory of change question, when people suggest using other federal agencies, what would that really look like? You know, WIOA doesn't provide wraparound supports for everyone. As I understand it, there are strict eligibility issues, and also a lot of local level control over what the funds are used for. So I think it goes back to like the theory of change about, it sounds like the board, all the committees are saying wraparound supports are needed for workers in training and maybe for people in early stages of registered apprenticeship. And then from there, what's the theory of change about how DOE should make sure it's being funded? Does that help, or was that more, you know, too much?
Yes, that helps. I guess at one of our meetings, we looked at the map. Where are the energy projects? Where's the energy work occurring? And so there are gaps in the country where work is not available. And so where's the concentration of the future energy projects going to happen, and the learning that goes with it? Are individuals that live in the gap areas, is there going to be an expectation that they relocate to the areas where the work is occurring? Or will we have suggestions on where maybe development could occur in the next 5, 10, 15 years, so that the, I guess the states or the suppliers, education training institutions can say, well, we need to ramp up and look at preparing another area of the country as a place to reach maybe the people of the Pacific Northwest or the Northern Plains, for example. And then I guess for the Indian and Native American population, I guess in the report, you know, we could mention that for tribal nations who are looking at energy as well, that we have an opportunity to use an existing authority that allows a tribe to apply for funding from 12 federal agencies, with those agencies like energy, transportation, education, will transfer a piece of their pie out over to the Department of Interior, and then the Interior will transfer the money to the tribe for their project. So I see an opportunity for a deployment project if we're opening the doors for our tribal nation to become engaged with the energy industry. But who is that tribe or tribal nations, and where is it located? And I see working with the American Indian Higher Education Consortium through Stephanie Bostwick, who is it comes from Northwest Indian College, that I see an opportunity down the road. And so I would just, I guess for the purpose of Indian and Native Americans or tribal nations, I think we have an opportunity to mention in that short report a mention.
Thanks for that, Kay. And, you know, as we've talked about common themes, this issue of equity seems to keep surfacing. And thank you for reinforcing the importance of ensuring the voice and representation of tribal communities in our outlook here. I know we've got just about 4 minutes left together. I do want to give the Berkeley team an opportunity and space here for any reflections you'd like to share with the group. Pam, maybe I'll start with you.
Sure. 2 big takeaways for me. One, so much of what we heard in the subcommittee reports really is going to fall really nicely into that report structure. So you, as has been mentioned, you've all done such tremendous work and took on a project that everybody thought was pretty large, but now we can see it really taking shape. So that feels solid for us, I think, as your writing support team. And then secondly, both to Maya's comments and to Kay's comments, those are things that we'll continue to keep in our minds as we approach the writing of this, when we receive your written recommendations and the context in which you lay that out. And as we go through the writing process, those voices will continue to be in the back of our minds, and we'll probably be reaching out. We see this as a pretty collaborative process where we'll be reaching out to the subcommittee chairs and saying, hey, we see this in your recommendations, and in such and such meeting, Kay said this important thing about that. Does that fit here, and can we tease that out, or is this an example that you'd like to add to that? So, and the same with some of the things that Maya raised as well, making sure that we're looking for embedded in the work that you're doing and can support teasing that out more deeply in the writing. Both of those critical streams, right? The deployment dollars, the external dollars, and the internal dollars as well.
Thanks, Pam. Francisco or Irem, anything to add?
Thank you. Just wanted to piggyback, on what Pam said. I think you said it perfectly. I'm really excited. The whole team is really excited about getting those documents by January 8th and start putting everything together. And absolutely, I think we're going to be reaching out to folks just to clarify things, to make sure that we're getting the tone of the recommendations correct. So just really looking forward to that process. So thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Irem. I can see by the body language there, you're good, looks like. So thank you for that. In my mind, I'm kind of looking at this as it's a relay race, and we're getting ready to hand off the baton now, right? We've been doing the research part, we're passing it off to our partners, but it's not as if our leg is now done. I think we're going to get called back for the third run around the track or something there. We can't pass the baton fully, but it does feel like there's a finish line that we're all working to. It's coming up pretty quickly. So with that, if there are no other comments, Piper, I think I'll turn it back over to you to close us out.
Thanks, Missy, and thanks everyone for your comments today. With that, I will formally conclude this meeting. Thank you all. We'll be in touch with more dates and all the documents shared in the meeting today.
Thanks, Piper. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.